you made it through the week. Congrats, because I know it was a hard week for some of you. And for others, just, it might have just been one of those weeks where you weren't paying attention. But I doubt it. Okay, so Friday night, I have a lot of stuff for you. Today, I was meeting with my staff, what are we going to talk about tonight? It turns out we had too much to talk about. We couldn't fit it all in. It was a very busy day. It continues to be a very busy day. But I will say this. On a Friday night, I can almost guarantee that a sequestered jury will come up with a verdict. I've said it on almost every case, and it always plays out, except for today. It did not play out in Delphi, Indiana. The sequestered jury there finished deliberations for the day and said, we'll go back tomorrow on a Saturday. So that tells you something. Either they are incredibly engaged with the evidence and looking over every single piece of it, or they don't agree. And they haven't had a verdict unanimous in that room yet. I'm going to talk all about it in a hot minute, but there's something else that happened in that case. Crime scene photos leaked. There's two girls we're talking about, young teens. It's very sad to hear that. They leaked online. What's important, though, is when they leaked online, there was evidence that was very important that the rest of the public got to see that had been held back from us by this judge. This judge has done this entire trial in secrecy, and it is appalling in America to see that. We don't do justice behind the curtain. It's just not American. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. I'm not going to show you the pictures. I'm not going to do that. But I am going to show you what the pictures represented so that you can decide what the key evidence meant and whether it means they have a guilty or not guilty guy in that courtroom. Okay, also, we've been asking for a month, where is Suzanne Simpson? Texas mom, very, very pretty mom of 4. Last seen having a huge fight with her husband out in the front. Neighbor heard the argument, then heard her scream, then heard a truck peel off, then heard no more. And ever since then, that husband on the right, he's been locked up, but not for murder, just for, the fight and some gun stuff. And then suddenly it all changed. But where is Suzanne? Does he know? What's that smile about? There's 4 kids at home waiting for mom to come home, and now dad is locked up too. What does he know? What doesn't he know? I'm going to talk about that all in just a moment. And also, I've kind of can't get off my soapbox on this Ellen Greenberg story in Pennsylvania. I just smell a rat. And I think you do too. Because you're probably like me. When the authorities say someone dies by suicide and they've been stabbed 20 times, 10 times in the back of the head, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, do what now? And yet that's what happened a decade and a half ago. They said Ellen Greenberg took her own life by stabbing herself that many times. Somehow, I don't even know how, but There was a fiancé in the picture who swore up and down he kicked down the door when she wouldn't answer. And swore up and down the security guard was right there with him, except that the security guard who we found said, that's not true. I wasn't there. So we kind of thought maybe it would all get a big second look, and maybe that fiance might get a second look. And maybe, just maybe, that suicide might be changed. And today we got news. And I'm going to share it with you tonight. I think you can tell by my face what I'm going to share. I'm going to start here, though. I do admit I was thinking that I would come on the air tonight. You've been all politicked out all day, and I'd be like, I got a verdict for you. You've been only waiting 7 years for it in Delphi, Indiana. Got a sequestered jury, 3-week trial. It's Friday afternoon. Of course. I even had the graphic made up. I don't have that verdict for you. They are going to spend the weekend elsewhere. You think that going home to their own beds would be real tempting for the jury. But then again, think about it. It did take 5 years just to make an arrest in the case. It took 2 years to get this case into an actual courtroom. Then 19 days of testimony, 64 witnesses, and 387 pieces of evidence. But, maybe it does make sense that the jurors are taking their time. Who knows? Maybe they're divided. For what it's worth, the whole town seems to be divided. Country might be divided, too. I want to show you some pictures outside the courthouse on the sidewalk. This is what was out there today. Lindsay Holler shot this for us, gave it to us, all these signs, and you might notice a pattern as you go through. Some signs support the victims, Abby Williams and Libby German, but then there are also a whole line of signs that are pro-Richard Allen, the defendant, the alleged child murderer. His supporters are not happy with what they've heard and seen in this courtroom. They're calling out the mistreatment they allege happened to him in an Indiana prison where he was being held before trial. Not a jail, prison. One of the posters read, "We love you, Rick Allen." It's weird. We don't usually see that in the case of an alleged child murderer. But none of this stuff outside the courthouse should move the needle at all in terms of the verdict, right? Jurors aren't seeing all that. It should not move the verdict, that stuff. But something else almost certainly will, and that's the crime scene photos. They are raw. They are explicit. They are god-awful. The jury saw them, and now they've leaked online. And as terrible as they are, they do show something very important. They show how those logs and the sticks were arranged on top of the girls' bodies. I said to you before, I'll say it again, I'm not going to show you those pictures here, but I am going to show you something that we had sketched out, a representation of what those bodies appeared like at the crime scene with all the sticks and the arrangements. And that's because the defense has long claimed that the girls were killed in a bizarre pagan sacrifice. But the judge said he wasn't having any of it, barred any mention, of that. Nothing. Not allowed to say that in the trial. Do not bring up the pagan stuff. But I'm going to show you, and then you can make your decision. I'm going to tell you right now, half my team thought one way and the other half thought another way. At the crime scene, Libby is seen placed on the right there. And she's lying flat on her back. She is completely naked. Her left arm is stretched above her head. And there's a really large log-like branch on her left shoulder extending above her head and below her legs. There are two smaller branches that form a V where her legs come together, extending upward towards her head. There's another branch placed across her neck and both shoulders. Over to the left there, you can see Abby is just a few feet away from her. She's on Libby's right side, but she's on our left view. She is completely dressed, but you'll probably know from the evidence, the clothes that she's wearing are actually her friend's clothes. They're Libby's clothes. Abby is also lying on her back. Her elbows are bent. Her arms are on her chest. Her left leg is straight, but her right leg is bent at the knee and under her left leg. There are three branches on top of Abby, one across her chest and shoulders, another on her left side, forming a cross with the first one, and then reaching just past the top of her head. A third branch is placed across the stick that's over her neck. Is this random? Is it a pattern? Does all of this amount to anything? Or is it just the work of a tired, desperate killer, maybe trying to hide bodies and then running out of time and leaving them just like that? This is a good time to bring in my panel. Susan Hendricks is a longtime TV journalist and author of Down the Hill, My Descent into the Double Murder in Delphi. She was in the courtroom again today and has been covering this since the beginning. Jesse Weber is an attorney and a NewsNation legal contributor and a good friend of the show. And Lindsay Holler is a producer on my upcoming podcast, Drop Dead Serious. She's also been covering the Delphi case since the beginning. She took those pictures of those signs outside the courthouse today. Welcome to all three of you. Susan, let me start with you and the crime scene pictures. I stared and tried to make sense of those sticks and logs and the formations. I came up with nothing. And I'm frustrated with myself, but I don't know if I should be. What is the prevailing wisdom from those who are in the courtroom?
You know, that is what people are battling over for so long. And you make a great point by saying everyone sees something different. And again, at a hearing at the end of July that I've spoken about, beginning of August, it was decided, will the judge allow the third person defense into this? Meaning, will the Odinism theory be allowed in? She said no over and over. And when I heard today, oh my gosh, this happened again, because Libby's grandmother called me months ago and said, someone sent me the crime scene photos and I screamed. So I believe this has been leaked before. But when you see it, Ashleigh, firsthand up front. I was in the front row that day when they showed them on a big screen. I really don't see that to me. But again, everyone sees something different. To me, it looks like whoever did this threw the sticks on the girls kind of last minute. But it is horrific to see. It is so hard to see. But I believe that it is random. But you're right. People see different things.
Yeah. Jesse, jump in as a lawyer and just in how his defense attorneys handled these pictures and the positions of those sticks, given the fact they weren't allowed to say, I see pagan ritual formations with these sticks. How did they handle it in front of the jury?
They don't even need to go the pagan route. Why? Because they've already put the focus on an alternative suspect. Brad Weber, no relation, apparently lives near the crime scene. And they said in his garage are sticks. And this is also an individual that apparently has a similar gun or the same gun as the prosecutors say Richard Allen has. They also say he has conflicting stories about what he was doing that day. So the idea the jury might see this, might see sticks, might put two and two together and say, there might be more to the story here. And they might believe the defense's narrative that this is a sloppy investigation, which is why you're seeing so much support for Richard Allen outside that courtroom.
Well, I'll agree on the sloppy investigation. Let me ask you, Lindsay, you were out there. You went out to the crime scene. You actually followed the steps of the poor girls as they were being marched throughout this sort of death journey. You crossed the river. You went to the site where their bodies were found. To me, in the pictures, it looks very sparsely wooded, and that if you wanted to find enough sticks to cover two bodies, it would take a really, really long time, and it gets dark February 13th around 5, 6 o'clock at night. Is it possible this was a heavy man who was out of shape, trying and physically just ran out of steam and left them as they were?
You know, a lot of people don't believe that. They think that this must have been multiple individuals, but on the other end, there's a lot of people that think just that, actually. And
but
in fact...
When you see the pictures and the conversations, you know, because everyone talks around the courthouse and you're talking to everybody, both in the courtroom, out of the courtroom, is there a consensus or is it completely split? Are there people who are angry Odinism and the pagan issue wasn't brought back up?
You know, they wanted to bring that back up, but actually the prosecution asked the lead detective, Jerry Holman, do you think that the sticks were there to camouflage the girls? And he says, yes, but I also think it could have been what's called an undoing, which is basically a symbolic reversal of the crime because of the way that the sticks were placed on the girls were covering their wounds. Unfortunately, that's what we saw.
The signs that you took pictures of, Lindsay, I'm going to stick with you for a minute. The signs that you photographed outside the courthouse today, they were all pro Richard Allen. Does he have a lot of supporters that, you know, hold up a picket sign or yell and scream? As I understand, things are not very friendly around the courthouse.
Actually, you're totally correct. When's the last time you've seen an accused child killer having the public profess their love for him outside the courthouse while waiting on a verdict? It's really crazy. And, you know, of course, there's a lot of public discourse online. It's split, but it's actually more shocking to see the locals who are just as equally split, if not more, on this case. And it's very high stress, high tension. It's in a situation I've never been in before.
Susan, jump back in and talk to me a little bit about the sequestered jury. Look, I don't know if they drive by the front of the courthouse and out the van, see those signs. I somehow doubt it, although I will say in the George Floyd case, all those protesters and everything that was going on inside the courthouse was in full display of jurors every day to and from the courthouse. But they're sequestered, and it is a bummer being stuck for weeks on end, sequestered. And here I was Friday night assuming they wanted to go home, but they didn't.
I think you would have been right, though. I really do, because the first day they only deliberated, I think, like 2 hours. It's only been 9 hours so far. I thought the same thing, and then I thought, wait a minute, what day is it? Oh, yeah. But they asked to start an hour later tomorrow. They were supposed to start at 9. Now they're starting at 10. I'm thinking that they're coming back tomorrow with a verdict. And, Lindsay, it's great to see you. We see each other in the courtroom. So when you go through this, it's been, 19 days plus? There is a connection once you're inside, because to get inside and to go through everything that we go through, it's like you see it is a divide. It's unlike, like Lindsay said, anything I've ever seen before. Of course, we saw with OJ back in the day, but now I believe it's online and those people are showing up. And it's a little bizarre. You don't want to complain too much because finally, when you get in the courtroom, it's freezing, by the way, you get in and you think, we're here. And then Judge Stoll is like, no mints, no water, no talking, and you just sit there. But I'm grateful I was allowed in. It's a bizarre experience. And just like Jesse said, the defense does have that, saying, look, this is a botched investigation, pointing their finger at Brad Weber. But the defense is saying, Brad Weber may have done it. The prosecution saying, no, Brad Weber proves that Richard Allen did it because his van drove by and interrupted Richard Allen, and he mentioned it in the confession.
So I want to dovetail on the confession part of it. Jesse, you and I cover a lot of cases, and we don't get confessions very often. And when we do, most people think it's like, well, hook, line, and sinker. There you go. It's done. Slam dunk. But we've also seen a lot of confessions that are false. And it's confounding to a lot of people who've never been in the sitch. But they do happen. In this case, there are so many. It's not just one. It's not a police interrogation. It's conversations with jailers and the warden and his wife. And yes, it was in a crazy situation, but plenty of people have been in solitary for long periods of time and don't confess to anybody who will listen. There is the bullet issue. I get it. There's ballistics that they shed, some doubt on that. But all that together, don't you think this is a really hard one for the jury to deny? Who else but Richard Allen?
I think the confessions are the toughest thing for the jury to get over, and it's a tough job for the defense. But what are they going to say? They're saying he spent 13 months in prison, solitary confinement. He had a mental breakdown. There's testimony that he was psychotic. And what they said when they said false memories or your false beliefs, it went from him saying, I did it, to I think I did it, maybe I did it, I don't know. And if the jury goes through that and says, well, what condition was he put in? And then you couple it with the shaky, there's no forensic evidence tying him back to the crime, problems with the bullet. They may say that's reasonable doubt. And he might have actually done it. But the question becomes, did the prosecution prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt? And that might be what the jury's struggling with. I have to imagine that the confession is really hard for the defense to get past, but they seem to have a little bit of ways to argue against it.
As committed as all three of you are to covering this case, and as much as my team loves doing this, we are not doing a show tomorrow. So if there is a verdict tomorrow, can you hold it till Monday? All of you come back.
You got it.
Really appreciate it. You guys are working so hard on it, really. Susan Hendricks, Jesse Weber, and Lindsay Holler. Again, big secret coming out, the Drop Dead Serious podcast. It's my podcast. We'll be telling you about it a lot more in the future. Thanks, all of you. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. All right. So, with every day that passes, Suzanne Simpson's 4 children must be thinking that they may never again see their mother. She vanished a month ago after a fight with her husband, and that husband has been locked up on charges ever since. But the charges were related to the fight and nothing else. Now everything has changed. So how is a new charge against them potentially going to orphan those 4 kids? Got the details next. There is some breaking news tonight in a mystery that we've been following for a month now. The disappearance of Suzanne Simpson, a real estate agent, a wife, and a mother of 4 in Texas. She's no longer a missing persons case. It's a murder case. Suzanne's husband, Brad Simpson, came under suspicion right away since the last time Suzanne was seen. She and Brad were fighting physically outside their house. A neighbor saw that happen and then heard screams from the woods nearby and saw Brad speed away in his truck. Days later, Brad Simpson was jailed on minor charges stemming from the fight, and then he was hit with a federal gun charge. But now, tonight, he is officially a murder suspect. The chief of police in Olmos Park, Texas, made the announcement.
Yesterday, the Olmos Park Police Department, along with the Texas Rangers, have charged Brad Chandler Simpson with murder in the death of his wife, Suzanne Clark Simpson. We realize that this doesn't bring closure to Suzanne's family, but we hope it will allow them to enter the next phase of their grieving process with more clarity. This thorough and tireless investigation has been conducted in efforts to find justice for Suzanne and her family.
Still a few things missing, though, as far as we know. A body, for one, and a murder weapon for another. Sig Christensen has been all over this story as investigative reporter for the San Antonio Express News, and he's back with me on the program. Sig, thanks for joining me again. So, today we were hoping for an update. Today we were hoping they'd say they'd found Suzanne, but they didn't say that. Do they say anything about where she might be?
No, the police, as usual, have not been very helpful. They've been that way from the beginning. We don't really have a clue. Last night, I ran out to a location that somebody tipped me to, saying that there was a body there, or suggesting that. It wasn't true. We get those, unfortunately, all the time. So we don't know anything. It's a weird situation. They've charged this guy with murder, but as far as everyone knows, no one has a body.
Have they said anything about evidence that led them to the murder charge?
Not only have they not said anything, the murder charge details are sealed for 30 days. So we won't get anything from them until about 2 months after Brad Simpson was jailed. His month anniversary is tomorrow. So I guess after Thanksgiving, a couple of weeks after that, maybe we'll have some information. But given the way this has been going, we may not have a body even then.
I hope that's not true. I hope so for the family. Speaking of family, this is one family dynamic I did not expect. At that press conference today, Brad Simpson's brother took to the microphone. And let me play it for the audience, because they might be a little bit surprised to hear the person who's charged with murder, his brother is the one speaking and saying this. Take a look.
The situation is heartbreaking for us, but it brings some peace to our family, knowing that the authorities have gathered enough evidence to move forward with charges. It is our sincere hope and prayer that Brad will find the compassion and courage to end his family's suffering by cooperating with the authorities to help us find his wife.
Sig, at first, I think a lot of people thought that was Suzanne's brother, but this is Brad's brother, the man they've arrested, begging him to give up information and saying that the arrest brings peace to our family. Not only that, Sig, but their 20-year-old daughter, Chandler, took to her Instagram post and said, "My father took my mother's life in a state of rage and control. My mother tried to leave my father and lost her life." Does Brad Simpson have anyone supporting him now that he's behind bars on a murder charge?
No one. That's an interesting thing to talk about. It's almost as if he was not a particularly well-liked person in that family to begin with. I don't know why that is, but, he didn't have many friends either. Val Cotter is about the one friend he had, and Val Cotter, the police have said, is pretty much willing to do anything for him. That was the argument that they had today at the bond hearing when Val Cotter's bond was reduced to $100,000, and he made bail. But, outside of Val Cotter, there's nobody who seems to be that friendly with Brad Simpson. And so you wonder, was Brad Simpson known to have been violent or threatening with his wife in the past? The thing I'm pretty sure of is that if somebody beats somebody at some point, it's not the first time. So that's been a point of discussion among, I'm sure, a whole bunch of people. But again, we don't know. The police aren't talking. They have been extremely tight-lipped. And, of course, after a month of this, we still are no closer to finding Suzanne Simpson than we were the day she vanished.
That's the hard part. That's the hard part. Sig Christensen, we'll check back in with you at least maybe 30 days from now, but maybe beforehand. Appreciate this tonight.
Sure thing.
Coming up, Ellen Greenberg has been gone almost 14 years now, ever since she bled out on her own kitchen floor from multiple stab wounds, 20 to be exact, and 10 of those stab wounds towards the back of her head and neck. Confoundingly, the authorities said that was suicide. And as incomprehensible as it is, to Ellen's family and many, many others. Officials up and down the line in Pennsylvania's government have stuck to their guns. Now comes what may be the final word, and we'll have that next. There are a few things that are certain in police work except for this. Families typically don't want to accept that a loved one died by suicide. The Greenberg family certainly didn't believe that Ellen Greenberg, a Philadelphia teacher engaged to be married, died that way at age 27. But in her case, it wasn't just shock or knee-jerk denial. The forensics in her case were off the rails. She was stabbed 20 times, and 10 of those wounds were to the back of her head. This is kind of similar to the knife, okay? This is about a 9-inch knife, and Ellen's was a 10-inch knife, serrated, pointed at the end. You just think about this for a second. Imagine stabbing yourself in the back of your head and neck 20 times. Now, she was left-handed. That's why I'm holding it with my left hand. You've got to grab it, right? And then you've got to somehow get the strength to do this to yourself. I also have a bad shoulder, so I'm probably not doing it well. But doing that in the back of your head and neck just doesn't really make sense. It's really hard to do it. Trust me, don't. Made a mistake once trying it. Her family's resolve to find out the truth about what happened to her has not waned in almost 14 years. But finding out the truth just got a whole lot harder today. A few reminders about this case. Ellen was found dead in the apartment that she shared with her fiancé, Sam Goldberg. A homicide investigation was started for obvious reasons, right? Stabbed 20 times, 10 in the back. But later, for reasons that are far from obvious, the death was reclassified as a suicide. Now that fiancé, Sam Goldberg found Ellen's body. He said he had to kick down the apartment door when he returned from the gym in their building because the door was locked, he said, from the inside. Here's part of his 911 call.
Hello?
Yeah, hi, okay.
Are you willing to do CPR with me over the phone so they can...
I have to, right?
Okay, so get her flat on her back, bare her chest, okay? You want to rip her shirt off. Okay? Kneel down by her side.
Oh, my God. Allie, please.
Listen, you can't freak out, sir, because you...
Okay, I'm trying not to. Her shirt won't come off. It's a zipper. Oh, my God, she stabbed herself.
NewsNation tracked down the security guard who Sam Goldberg said he was with when he broke down the door, and the guard said, that's not true. The guard said he wasn't there at all. It also came out that Goldberg's uncle, a lawyer at the time and now a judge, accessed the apartment after Ellen's death and took laptops, phones, and credit cards. And despite all of that, officials up to and including the Attorney General refused to change the suicide finding and investigate further. That Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, became the governor of Pennsylvania and had family connections to that fiancé who lied about kicking down the apartment door with a security guard present. And now the case is officially in limbo. The DA in neighboring Chester County, who got the case after some conflict of interest issues, put out the following statement today, and I quote, "This investigative team determined that based on the current state of the evidence, we cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a crime was committed. Because we cannot meet our burden of proof with information and evidence presently available, we place the investigation in an inactive status. There is no statute of limitations for criminal homicide in Pennsylvania, and because investigations can take new directions, we are not closing the case." But effectively, that's that. It should be noted that the DA, like Governor Josh Shapiro, is a Democrat. I want to bring our senior national correspondent, Brian Enton, into the story. He did a very deep dive on all of this earlier this year. He spoke with Ellen Greenberg's parents today as well. I just want to make note, in that statement that was released, the current state of the evidence and evidence presently available kind of makes me think that maybe evidence is missing. Maybe I'm reading in too much. But, Brian, you talked to Josh and Sandy Greenberg, Ellen's parents, today. How do they react to this news?
Yeah, it's interesting what you said, sort of reading between the lines. They actually called it a vanilla statement because you could sort of look at it two different ways. It was disappointing because they are not going to continue investigating right now, but they did kind of leave the door open, and they didn't flat out say that there wasn't anything shady that went on here. Listen to what her parents told me.
We want to thank Chester County for having a preview of this so we knew what was going to happen yesterday with our attorneys and my wife, the four of us, two attorneys and the wife. Okay? We found their investigation to be very shallow. Their investigative reporter or whoever, their investigative expert.
Their forensic expert lacked
any
medical training. They lacked any forensic medical training.
He had a degree in entomology, which is the study of insects. He did have some sort of criminal justice degree, but a master's, but he didn't really have the credentials of a true forensic specialist.
And one thing that frustrated them, Ashleigh, is that this investigation by the Chester County DA went on for years, and then this was the ultimate outcome.
So what's their status in terms of hope? I mean, look, there's no statute of limitations on murder, but this is depressing. Do they have hope?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, they're an incredible couple. I mean, this was their only daughter. They're so strong. They've been fighting this for years. They've got a civil case that is ongoing. They're suing the city of Philadelphia. That's very much active. And then the Supreme Court is going to hear parts of the case coming up next month. This is what they said.
As for what we were expecting, I'd have to say we were expecting much worse. Because everything that Philadelphia has done, everything that the Attorney General has done, everything that the criminal justice system in Pennsylvania has done has been much more against us than this. This is sort of like vanilla. It's not chocolate, it's not butter pecan, it's vanilla.
Just because we keep having these setbacks, like this didn't pinch any harder than any of the other decisions that have come along the way. We're not giving up. I don't have a job to keep my political ambitions going. I want justice for my daughter, and right now I think there's a trail of many other victims who've been mistreated by the politicians.
It's very interesting what she said about the politicians, Ashleigh, and I think that part is still unfolding. Governor Josh Shapiro, big name Democrat, all sorts of rumors about could this case have something to do with why he wasn't chosen as Harris's VP. The Attorney General, just elected in Pennsylvania, is a Republican. So there's also thoughts, could a Republican Attorney General now come in and say, wait a minute, I actually do want to investigate something that Democrat Josh Shapiro has said nothing to see here. So it could get interesting.
Yeah. And he can investigate down and up, potentially. Brian, this story's not over. Thank you for all your dogged work on it, and I'm looking forward to the next development. Thank you for this.
Thanks, Ash.
Hardest working man in the news business, I'll tell you. Still to come, politics, again, making its way into true crime. This week's election may have thrown a giant wrench into the plan for Lyle and Eric Menendez to get out of prison. The Los Angeles DA, who supported their bid, lost his bid to keep his job. So the new DA has some big decisions to make. His name is Nathan Hochman, and he is live with me next. The law is the law, and politics are politics. And regardless of how you feel about either one, the fact is they are not entirely separate. Probably never have been. Police chiefs are not elected, but sheriffs are. Half the states elect judges, and every state but 3 elects the district attorneys there. And that includes California. And that may or may not pose a big problem for Lyle and Eric Menendez. This time last week, Lyle and Eric were so close to freedom they could taste it. The Los Angeles DA, George Gascon, had publicly endorsed no fewer than 4 different pathways for the brothers to leave prison after 3 decades of serving life no parole. He backed their habeas petition, claiming new exculpatory evidence. He supported resentencing the brothers to life with parole or downgrading their convictions from first-degree murder to manslaughter. He even wrote letters to California's governor supporting all-out clemency. But then the election happened, and George Gascon lost. His successor is Nathan Hochman, who takes office in less than a month, but says he needs more time to study the Menendez case. And the newly elected DA, Nathan Hochman, is live with me now. Welcome back. It's nice to have you back. And I guess congratulations are due. What a difference a week can make.
What a difference. Thank you for having me on.
It's good to have you. You've got a lot ahead of you, a ton. I'm curious about the level of priority that the Menendez case takes.
So the Menendez case, like any case of a similar nature, will take a high priority because I owe it to the Menendezes, the victim family members, the public, to as expeditiously as possible review and do a thorough review of the facts and the law in this particular case. As we discussed before, that will involve reviewing thousands of pages of confidential prison files that are not accessible to me at this point. The trial transcripts for 2 months-long trials. I'll need to speak to the prosecutors, the law enforcement officers, defense counsel, the victim family members, review the voluminous exhibits, and at that point go ahead and figure out what the position should be going forward. And again, the Menendezes deserve a DA actually doing their job so that there's no cloud of credibility over a decision. When you had the prior DA make that decision 12 days before an election, when he could have made that decision 8 to 16 months before or just after the election, it put a cloud of credibility over whether or not it was the just decision or just a political ploy for a guy 30 points down that had run out of money for his media campaign.
I hear you there. I also, listen, I don't know your business, but I do know that there is a whole swath of assistant DAs that all worked on that case as well, many of them nonpartisan, many of them who would not support the position that their boss took. So should there be such duplication of service, number one, when all the soldiers already did a ton of the work? And number two, I'm not a lawyer, and I feel like I know the whole case. What more could there possibly be, Mr. Hochman, to find out reviewing all the files?
So though you're not a lawyer, or even if you were a lawyer, you have not had access to thousands of pages of confidential prison files. I would doubt you've actually reviewed the transcripts of the 2 months-long trials that probably range in the thousands of pages. So you might have seen the Netflix special, you might have seen a documentary, you might think you actually know something about the case. But if you actually want to know and do a thorough review of the facts and the law, to know something about the case, to the point where you can defend that decision in court, you got to do the hard work. And if you've already done the hard work, that's impressive because you've got access to stuff that no one in the public should have access to. But if this case does land on my desk, and you pointed out there are 2 other ways that it actually might not end in my desk. That habeas petition has a court hearing the week of November 25th, and the governor at any point can grant clemency. And there's a chance that when I come into office on December 2nd, the case is already resolved. But if it's not resolved, that I will perform that thorough review on this case, and quite honestly, every case, that a case like this deserves. And if I need some additional time, there will not be delay for delay's sake. I have 34 years of criminal justice experience. I've been involved in hundreds of cases as a defense counsel and a prosecutor. I know how to expeditiously review a record, and I will do so in this case.
I think you might have still been in college when I actually covered the Menendez cases. Oh, Lord, I'm so old. I did not read the trial transcripts recently, Nathan, but I lived both those cases as a journalist. I've been at it almost 37 years, so there's that. But you're right, I don't have the transcripts, or I don't have the confidential files from the prison, so you got me there. I do want to ask you this. There's a resentencing court date for December 11th, and that's 9 days after you take office. Will you let it happen? Where will you stand on that?
Again, if I'm prepared to go forward on that date, we'll go forward. If I'm not, I'll ask the court for some additional time to do this thorough review. Again, I'll say it once, I'll say it twice. The Menendezes, the public, and the victim families members require and should expect the DA to do a thorough job. I'm not going to do anything less than a thorough job because ultimately I'll have to defend that decision in court wherever the decision might ultimately get challenged. And so in order to do that, you got to do the hard work. And by the way, thank you so much for the compliment, because I was about 30 years old in the first trial. And the fact that you think I was in college, I would give you a hug and a kiss if I was right there.
You look like a baby. But listen, congratulations on the win. I know you have so much ahead on your plate, but I really appreciate you taking time to talk to me, and I hope it's not going to be the last.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, Nathan Hochman, the newly elected district attorney in Los Angeles. We will continue to follow that story for sure. And still to come, he is arguably one of the biggest country stars in history, but he is now gearing up for a fight that could tarnish his career forever. How Garth Brooks is planning to stay out of low places. Next. Garth Brooks is looking for some friends in high places for a change. The country music superstar wants to move his rape and sexual assault lawsuit out of a California state court and into a federal court. His lawyers filed a motion a few days ago using a code that allows a case to move to federal court if a few of the conditions are met. Brooks is being accused of sexually harassing a hair and makeup artist for years and then raping her. But the singer is suing her back, insisting that it is all a shakedown for money. So what's the difference between the state and the federal level for him? One legal expert says that federal cases typically go to trial faster. They find their juries from a bigger pool, and that the federal judges tend to dismiss cases more often than state judges do. There's no word yet on any response to that motion, but we're continuing to watch. And before I go, I want to show you something. There is this little app that you can get, and it is NewsNation's app, and it's really good. And one of the cool things I saw on it today that I didn't realize existed until I was mucking about was that you can listen to everything that we're doing as like a podcast. There's like a whole listen option. So I want you to just check it out. Download the app for NewsNation, because even if you don't feel like looking at me, you can hear me. Maybe as you're going to sleep. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you had a great week. Have an even better weekend. Stay tuned. Cuomo's coming up next.
Hey everybody, I'm Brian Entin in for Chris Cuomo. It's Friday night. We are live. Chris obviously has a well-deserved day off after that epic all-nighter on election night. Not only did President-elect Trump win the Electoral College and the popular vote, Republicans also won the Senate, and right now we are waiting on pins and needles for the outcome of the House of Representatives. It is close, and it very well could go to the Republicans, which means Trump will control all of Washington, D.C. Now, as of this moment, 24 races are still to be called in the House. It is looking very good for Republicans. We are watching it now. We're waiting for results. They could literally come at any moment. Remember, NewsNation was the first network to call the presidential election for Trump, thanks to Decision Desk HQ.